It's never pleasant to be on the receiving end of disapproval, yet annually, certain nations seem to attract more geopolitical disfavor than others. In the following 12 chapters, we will delve into the complexities of international disapproval to understand why some countries face significant global criticism. Prepare yourself for a challenging, informative, and at times quite sobering journey. We will count down from 10 to 1, unveiling the most disliked nations of 2024. Each chapter will explore the reasons behind the international disfavor these countries face. From political scandals to public protests, we will cover all aspects. Stay tuned for an in-depth analysis of the world's least favored nations. Kicking off our list at number 10 is a nation that's practically a self-isolating meme, North Korea. Now, you might think a country run by a man who looks like he cuts his own hair with a rusty butter knife and dictates the acceptable hairstyles for everyone else wouldn't be winning any popularity contests. And you'd be right. Years of nuclear threats, human rights abuses that would make a dictator blush, and enough propaganda to make Goebbels look like an amateur blogger have cemented North Korea's place firmly in the avoid-at-all-costs category of the global stage. The Hermit Kingdom's isolationist policies and strict control over its citizens' lives have only added to its unpopularity. From the tightly controlled borders to the lack of internet access, North Korea remains a mystery to much of the world. International sanctions and the stories of defectors paint a grim picture of life inside the country, further solidifying its position as one of the most disliked nations in 2024. Coming in at number 9, it's Iran, a country with a rich history and culture, sadly overshadowed by a government that seems hell-bent on making everyone nervous. We're talking about a theocracy that makes the Vatican look like a rave, coupled with a nuclear program shrouded in more secrecy than a Kardashian baby announcement. Add in a dash of human rights violations that would make a UN inspector weep, and you've got a recipe for international alienation that's about as appetizing as week-old Persian rice. Despite the political turmoil, Iran's cultural heritage remains a beacon of its past glory. From the bustling bazaars to the intricate Persian art, there's a lot more to this nation than meets the eye. The younger generation is pushing for change, hoping to bridge the gap between tradition and modernity. Iran's future is uncertain, but its people remain resilient and hopeful. Well, folks, we finally made it to Russia, a country that's less vodka and bears and more geopolitical tension and questionable international relations. Imagine a Venn diagram, right? One circle is countries invading their neighbors, and the other is countries with leaders who look fantastic shirtless on horseback. Russia, my friends, is the whole damn diagram. Now, I'm not saying their international policies are confusing, but their diplomatic playbook seems to be written in Cyrillic, soaked in vodka, and used to line a bear's toilet. The point is, from Ukraine to Syria, Russia's recent track record has landed them squarely on the "we need to talk about your behavior" list. But let's not forget, Russia is also a land of rich history and vibrant culture. From its contributions to literature and the arts, to its achievements in science and space exploration, Russia remains a fascinating and complex nation. Let's talk about China, shall we? A country whose global footprint is expanding faster than its panda's waistlines after a bamboo buffet. Now, I'm not saying their economic rise hasn't been impressive. They've gone from making plastic toys that break the second you open them to, well, pretty much everything else. But with great economic power comes, well, a lot of uncomfortable questions about human rights and trade practices that would make a sweatshop owner blush. We're talking allegations of forced labor, intellectual property theft, and enough censorship to make even the most enthusiastic Instagram influencer say, okay, that's a bit much. And let's not forget the international trade disputes that have left many countries questioning their economic policies. Add to that the political unrest in regions like Hong Kong and the military's heavy-handed approach, and you've got a recipe for global controversy. And now for a story that's less tragic and more punched directly in the gut with a fist made of sadness. Syria, a nation that was once a beacon of history and culture, has spent the last decade trapped in a civil war more complicated than a Christopher Nolan film explained by a sleep-deprived toddler. We're talking a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions, with millions displaced, countless lives lost, and enough war crimes to make even Henry Kissinger say, "All right, that's a bit excessive even for me." The worst part? It seems like the world has largely moved on, leaving the Syrian people to navigate a reality that's bleaker than a Russian novel written by someone who's allergic to sunshine. The decade of despair continues with no clear end in sight, and the international community's response remains woefully inadequate. Afghanistan, a nation that's been called the graveyard of empires, continues to be a geopolitical hotbed. After decades of conflict and the tumultuous withdrawal of U.S. forces in 2021, Afghanistan remains trapped in a cycle of instability. The Taliban's back in charge, and while they may be good at growing beards and banning things that bring people joy, governing seems to be a bit of a struggle. The humanitarian situation is dire, with widespread poverty and hunger, and the future remains uncertain for millions of Afghans. It's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube that's also on fire and occasionally explodes. So, yeah, not great. From the British to the Soviets, many have tried and failed to control this land. The resilience of its people is remarkable, but the challenges are immense. Next up is Pakistan, a country grappling with a delightful cocktail of challenges, terrorism, political instability, and a constantly simmering tension with its neighbor, India. It's like they're trying to make a biryani, but someone keeps adding gunpowder instead of spices. The country has been a key player in the fight against terrorism, but it's also faced accusations of harboring militant groups. And let's not forget the chronic economic woes and political corruption that plague the nation. Basically, Pakistan is a country holding its breath and no one's quite sure when or if it's going to exhale. The healthcare system is struggling, education faces numerous challenges, and infrastructure is in dire need of improvement. Adding to the turmoil, natural disasters and the impacts of climate change test the resilience of its people. Yet, amidst all this, Pakistan's cultural richness and diverse population continue to hold on to hope for a better future. Venezuela, a nation blessed with stunning natural beauty, vast oil reserves, and a government that couldn't organize a pub crawl in a brewery. Once one of the wealthiest countries in South America, Venezuela has been in a state of economic and political freefall for years. Hyperinflation has rendered the currency practically worthless. People are struggling to afford basic necessities like food and medicine. And the political situation? Let's just say it makes a playground squabble look like a UN summit. Despite all this, the country's natural beauty remains unparalleled, with breathtaking landscapes and diverse wildlife. The oil industry, once a symbol of prosperity, now struggles under mismanagement and corruption. Infrastructure is crumbling, with roads and bridges in disrepair, making daily life a challenge for its citizens. Yet, amidst the chaos, the resilience of the Venezuelan people shines through as they help each other survive these trying times. And at number 9, it's the supposed leader of the free world, a country that seems determined to undermine its own legacy faster than you can say superpower fatigue. Yes, it's the United States of America. Now, before you flood the comments with angry emojis, let's be clear. America has a lot going for it. Unfortunately, it also seems hell-bent on snatching defeat from the jaws of victory at every turn. From its wildly inconsistent foreign policy to its increasingly fractured domestic landscape, the U.S. is looking less like a beacon of hope and more like a cautionary tale in slow motion. And don't even get me started on the healthcare system. Education, too, is a battleground, with debates over curriculum and funding creating more division. The nation's struggle with gun violence and social justice issues further complicates its image on the world stage. Despite its challenges, the U.S. remains a land of immense potential and resilience. Rounding out our top 10 is a nation synonymous with both religious significance and seemingly intractable geopolitical conflict, Israel. Now look, it's a tiny country facing enormous challenges, but that doesn't excuse its often criticized policies and actions. The ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a tangled web of historical grievances, political maneuvering, and frankly, some real head-scratcher decisions on both sides. It's a situation so complex and sensitive that even attempting to discuss it feels like navigating a minefield, which, come to think of it, might be an apt metaphor for the entire region. The international community remains divided, with some advocating for peace and others taking sides, adding layers to an already intricate issue. Well, there you have it, the top 10 most disliked nations in the world. Now, before you grab your pitchforks and torches, remember that this list is based on global perception data, which, much like a bag of chips, should be taken with a grain of salt. And while it's easy to focus on the negative, it's important to remember that every country has its own unique story, complexities, and, dare I say, redeeming qualities. Except for you, North Korea. You're on thin ice. This has been 2024's Most Disliked Nations Top 10 Countdown. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more insights into the state of global affairs. And remember, there's always hope for a better tomorrow. Pause 2S. But what does the future hold for these nations? Will they remain on this list forever, or is there hope for change? Pause 3S. Global perceptions are as fluid as the ocean, constantly shifting with the tides of political landscapes, social movements, and international relations. Take Germany, for example. Once a pariah post, World War II, it has since transformed into a respected global leader. Pause 3S. Perhaps North Korea might open its borders and embrace diplomacy, or Iran might find common ground in nuclear negotiations. Russia could see a shift in leadership that redirects its global stance, and the United States might repair its fractured alliances. Pause 3S. It's worth noting that change is often driven by the people. Grassroots movements, cultural exchanges, and the power of diplomacy can reshape the narrative for any nation. Pause 2S. So, while today's list paints a bleak picture, the canvas of tomorrow is still blank. It's up to the leaders and citizens of these nations to decide what image will be painted. Pause 3S. And that's a wrap. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more thought-provoking content. Until next time, keep an open mind and remember, the world is always evolving.